Good evening, everybody. It is 6:30, so if everyone's ready, we will make a start. Welcome along tonight, members, officers, and any members of the public watching this joint scrutiny meeting on the internet. After last year's marathon meeting, I was determined to keep the agenda as clear as possible to give priority to the budget so that Ashley could have his moment in front of us. We've almost managed that. We've just got a bit of housekeeping to deal with at the same time. I'd like to thank members for their flexibility in accommodating the change of the meeting date, and it was unfortunate that had to happen. And I think again we will learn lessons for next year and seek to organise this meeting with a little bit more time for the accountancy colleagues to do their magic with the numbers. So with that, I'll move on to the agenda. The first item is apologies and substitutions.
Apologies from Councillor Richard Allen, Councillor Harris with Councillor Claire Allen substituting, from Councillor Smith, Councillor Webber-Jones and Councillor Waitman.
Thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 18th of December. Do we have any matters of accuracy or comments regarding them? Moved by Councillor Crook, seconded by Councillor Waitman. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Enbridge, sorry. Apologies, I should know by now, shouldn't I? Additional urgent business for reason of special circumstances. Do we have any? No additional items. Any declarations of interest that members wish to make? There are none. Moves us on to item 5, questions. I don't believe there are any under council procedure rule. So that takes us on then to the Scrutiny Commission work programme on pages 5 to 10 within your papers pack. A few observations on this one for you. We have had a significant number of housing policies added. The council's getting ready for a potential regulator for social housing inspection visit, and part of that process involves getting all of our policies up to date. We've also will be incorporating local government review into the agenda timetable as well at an appropriate time. There is the consultation programme that I'm sure you've all noticed has just been issued with a 26th of March deadline for comments back. Clearly the council will be responding to that, so and we will have a role in that. We're also adding in the community governance review outcome, the work that's currently underway. The consultation outcome will come back to scrutiny before progressing on to full council for decision. There is an additional executive meeting on Monday, which will be discussing the imposition of an Article 4 amendment to the HIMO planning arrangements for Hinckley. I have been assured that that is the consultation phase that's being approved. So post consultation, the matter we will have an opportunity for it to come back to scrutiny before a final decision. Are there any other comments regarding the work programme? This is your opportunity, members, if there's anything that you did want to query or add to the programme. No? Yes.
Just given all the issues we've had with leaks and road closures and stuff like that, would it be worthwhile asking Severn Trent to come back?
It is within our powers to do that.
Just a thought.
Yeah, if that was something which had the support from other members.
Oh,
yes.
Try and get him here.
Okay. We're still trying to get Cadent here for the first time, so I think that is going forward. So we haven't lost that. That goes back to David's resolution at full council some time ago. But that's still unfinished business. But yes, we can certainly add that into the programme, and I'll talk to Becky about how best to do that. Okay, thank you. So with that amendment, Are we happy to accept the work programme? Yes? Okay, thank you. Takes us on to item 7, which is the forward plan of executive and council decisions. This is here so that members have the opportunity to see what matters are going forward to the executive in advance, and to offer you the opportunity, should you wish to do so, to request that any of those matters come before the Scrutiny Commission. So are there any questions or comments regarding the forward plan? No? Oh, sorry. Yes.
A question I think I raised in the previous scrutiny meeting. There's obviously concern about the implementation of the new food waste bins, and I see this, it does seem to be up for discussion at the executive. Do we know what the content of that discussion will be, and would it be useful to try and get an update on that particular process, given the potentially quite high costs that the council may end up bearing as a result of it?
Yes, it was something that we mentioned at the previous meeting, and I did make a note to look to include it. I think at the moment the issue is about whether or not we include it pre or post implementation. Pre-implementation, there's a lot going on, and we're trying to ensure that the officers' time is spent on delivery, but we still have a role here for scrutiny, so it is intended to come back to scrutiny, but we haven't actually allocated a meeting yet, but that is something that we're actively working on.
And that's fair enough, as long as we are kept up to date, so I think it's quite an important issue locally. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions at all? Julie?
So I was just going to say, Chair, that we could, I know members have previously received a briefing note on the rollout of food waste collection, and we can certainly provide an update via that route if members think that would be useful in the meantime.
I'm sure we'd all welcome that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sure we'd all welcome that, but we are already getting the press releases and various other things, so that it's there's no surprises. I'm not expecting anyway, so no, that's all good. Okay, well, that takes us on then to item 8, which is the budget report. Within the budget report, there are a series of papers, A to F. What we will do, the actual reports themselves are the same reports that are going to go forward to full council. So the recommendations are not entirely appropriate for scrutiny. So what I've agreed with Ashley is that at the end of each report, we will note the report formally and take a resolution to pass forward our comments to full council relating to that particular report. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Yes, we're happy with that. Okay. Well, with that then, I'll hand across to Ashley. Please, can you start the process by item the medium-term financial plan, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just before I start, at the time I wrote this, the business rates NNDR1 return hadn't been completed. It always gets completed near the end of January. So a bit of good news there. There's a bit more income coming through from the business rate side. And although it will make the next 2 years a little bit easier, it's not going to fundamentally change the picture that are given in these reports, so that the general image picture that you're picking up will be the same, but it has eased slightly. To give you an idea, there's probably about £1 million going to be coming through over the 2 years, and although that sounds a lot of money, it's not enough to fundamentally change the picture that you're getting from these reports. On the first is a covering report, agenda item 8A. I'll take you to the table that sort of really summarises it, which is on the top of page 20 of the pack, just above paragraph 3.9. This is the expected position based on the provisional financial settlements. It doesn't become a final financial settlement until Monday. So this is based on the provisional. It's never changed in the past, so I'm not expecting it to change this year, but you always have to say it's based on the provisional. And what you can see here, obviously, is laid out the net expenditure, budget movements, which is the increases in the budget that we're expecting for that year. And then you get to a net budget requirement. And then there are a series of adjustments that the pension adjustments is a technical accounting adjustment that you see there, and it doesn't impact on the bottom line of the general fund. It's above and below the line. So what you can see in 25-26 is we had a net budget requirement of 16.8 million. Then you adjust for the pension. We have reserves movements. A little bit would have been to support the general fund position. There would have been other specific uses of that. And then you have a gain to the general fund of £314,000 with a net budget requirement of 15 million, and you have a healthy general fund balance and earmark balances of 5.5 million. A performance expected for the year of just under 15%. So 25-26 was a good year for us financially. And then we've had the settlements, we've had things like food waste come to hit us, we've had other things that we have to deal with, obviously temporary accommodation, etc., that we've seen hit us. And the settlement hasn't really given us enough money to cover all of the pressures that we face. And obviously there's the normal payroll increase. So when you get to 26-27, you can see there's a step up in the net budget requirements. We're suddenly looking at £18.7 million worth of net expenditure. That's not the gross, that's the net position. And that needs to be funded through council tax, business rates, and the financial settlement that we get from government. And as you can see, the net budget forecast there is what we more or less need to cover. And you can see we're using reserve movements of £2.7 million to bring the budget into balance to hit our 15% general fund target. And then the next year, 27-28, we've got a similar position. So that £5.5 million worth of reserves will be gone over those 2 years to support the general fund position to make sure that we can deliver our services. I have included for scrutiny the column in grey. It's not a formal part of the medium-term financial strategy because obviously the expectation is that the unitary will be in place there. But I thought for scrutiny, it might be just useful to see that for information so you can see what would happen if we had to balance that budget. And you can see we're in a loss position. We've run out of reserves. You would be in a make savings or identify new income, but that's not a formal part. We are concentrating on the 2 years where Hinckley has to make sure it sets a balanced budget. The table underneath that is describing the budget gap, and the gap is the difference between the funding and the income we get in and the expenditure that we need to meet. And again, you can see a very similar pattern there. I've got budget gap at the top, then damping, or that's the transitional relief. That is money that we will be getting. The reason I've separated it out, it is transitional relief. The government always refer to that as something to help you get from one position in your budget to another. So they've given us a 3-year settlement. They've said that's the transitional relief they're going to give, but there's always an assumption that they maybe take that away at a certain date in the future. So unfunded gap is what you've got there. So if you look across there, a fairly small one that you cover from reserves, 196,000 in 25-26, and then it slowly increases, and you begin to see the performance that we've got there. And the graph underneath that just enforces the use of reserves, so you can see that. The core spending that we've been provided with, this is the funding that we've had. So at paragraph 310, I've given a summary so that you can see the changes that government have made. And effectively what they've done is they've recalculated the prior year position to work out how much funding they want to give us in the 26-27 year. So as you see there, you've got something called the business rates baseline funding. BLF just stands for baseline funding. So when we collect business rates, that's the bit that they try to guarantee you can keep that irrespective of the actual collection. When I put this together, I thought we might be in a safety net position. And a safety net means that the tariff has increased so much that when you collected all the rates, the 40% share that we get, when you take the tariff off, the tariff is actually higher than the 40% share. And so the rates aren't there to give us our baseline. Fortunately, the NNDR1 has taken us out of a safety net position, and that's because the governments are giving a big chunk of Section 31 relief to the businesses in the area, and we benefit from that Section 31 relief as well. So we're now in a safety net position there. RSG, you can see here, has gone from 242,000 to £7 million. There's a lot of grants and support that was previously given to us that they've rolled up in that one grant. Okay, it's a very large change, but business rates growth of £4.7 million has disappeared. New homes bonus has gone. The national employer insurance that funding has gone. Homelessness and rough sleeping is still there, and they've pushed domestic abuse funding into that. The funding floor has gone, and so they're now rolling in damping. And then you get down near the bottom of that, you've got core spending power as provided in 25-26. If you looked at our core spending power last year, it was 15.5 million. Now, there was an amount that was paid to the pool locally. We used to pay £2.7 million to the pool, and government have said, we're going to include that as the part of the income that we need to protect for your council area. And so that's why the 2.7 million has been put in the prior year. They've taken out the national insurance cover, and they're saying, based on that, we're going to cut £619,000 out to the local funding that gets there. So we've ended up with 17.5 million in settlement. So at first it looks like you've gone up by about £2 million. But remember, the pool used to give us £1 million back anyway. So we had that as income. Food funding, our food costs are almost £1.5 million. Our payroll costs, not including the food waste, are probably going to go up by £1.25 million. And of course, temporary accommodation of sleeping, there's about another £500,000 of pressure there. So although it seems like you're getting 10 million, you're not really getting the cost of the pressures. And some of those pressures are due to national intervention by government telling you you must deliver this service and you must do that. And so you can't just accept the 2 million at face value as an increase. You have to consider those changes. Obviously, there's a very long and detailed document attached to this, which is actually the detailed medium-term financial strategy. There was only a couple of things that I wanted to bring to your attention on that. On page 41 of the pack, I've included a graph of where we are on council tax. We're at the lowest end of district councils. We're still in about the bottom 15. The level of council tax, obviously there's a range of reasons that go back many, many years as why you end up where you are on council tax. But other councils that have a higher council tax base would be in a more favourable position after the fair funding review. And so we are where we are on that council tax base. Government do make a calculation, a notional calculation of what the council tax is to assess how much money they want to give to us, and their assessments I think is just slightly lower than the actual council tax that we collect, but only tens of thousands of pounds, not much. The other table I was going to draw to your attention, I think it's on page 52. Oh, I missed it now. Apologies. There is a table in here. Yeah, there's a table on the bottom of page 52. This just separates out some of the larger pressures that we've got coming through and the larger savings or reductions in cost. And so this just gives members a bit more insights into the individual pressures that are coming through on the budget. Some of those you look down, food waste, you obviously know, the pay increment, distribution from the pool, £1 million, because the tariff has gone so high, the pool has been closed. Because there's no levy to pay to the pool. The tariff is so high, we can't pay money into the pool, so there's no purpose in being in the pool. And if somebody goes into a safety net position within the pool, the other partners can end up with a loss. And so it was decided to close the pool. But we've lost that £1 million. UK Shared Prosperity Fund, it's an in and out. The funding has ended, so I have to take the funding out, but I also have to take the costs out. So that doesn't impact the bottom line, but it is a budget adjustment that I have to make. The reason that homelessness is in there is it used to be a ring fence grant that we put in atop the line, but now it's part of the core funding, so it's below the line. So although we've still got the money, I still need to adjust it above the line to make sure that it's out. Homelessness accommodation, even though we've invested £5 million in temporary accommodation, the demand is still high. If you remember, we ended up spending about £2.1 million last year. So this will take us to about £1.5 million. So we're actually making a saving by spending that £5 million, but the demand and the need is still there, and the costs that we are charged, so we still need an increase in that budget. Interest on debt, we're beginning to take on more external debt. That leads to more interest that we have to pay. So those were the key ones. The only other one I'll touch on, you can see there's the various income, fuel savings, etc., increasing garden waste from the £5 that's going on the additional planning income, EPR packaging. We budgeted for about 1.1 million last year, but we're actually getting about 1.4 million. So, and that was, there was a lot of information that was shared by the council with what we thought the actual costs were, and it's ended up with us getting more money. And then there's that technical adjustments on the bottom of 1.6 million pounds, which is, it doesn't actually change anything because there's it's above and below the line adjustment with that. I wasn't going to draw anything else. It's obviously a very long document with a lot of information in, but I think I've covered the key things that I feel that you need to understand and take from that. Happy to take any questions.
Well, there you have it. Any questions that anyone wants to start with? Brian?
I feel as though I'm in the Titanic running into a cliff. We'll see. The budgetary funds seem to be going down. We're using the reserves basically, and it's all because of this devolution thing. What happens if all councils' reserves are zero by devolution? How the hell is anybody going to pick up the reins? And the other thing is the one I've always been on about, that the £1 million plus for homeless accommodation is not sustainable, is it? So what can the £1 million plus for homeless is not really sustainable, but how can we relieve it?
There's a couple of questions there. Local government reorganisation, if you remember the case that was put together, did note for the local area, I'm going from memory now, but it was about £109 million deficit that all the councils in the area were taking in to the unitary, because the county's got a deficit, obviously depending on which plan gets approved, if it's 3 unitaries or 2 unitaries, but there's a big deficit that's in the area. The county's got a big deficit. The city's reporting that it's got problems, so we're not the only one that are in this position. And I think to some extent, for a long time, the government have said districts have got reserves. We want you to use your reserves. Well, this is a way of making the reserves get used, but it doesn't help. The unitary are going to have to deal with making sure that they can deliver the combined services of all of the councils that go in. So I should imagine there's going to be some difficult decisions somewhere, although there are some councils locally that still do have some reserves that they can take in. So I'm assuming there's an assumption that when it's all washed together, those reserves will then be able to help the unitary. And there is a savings initiative in the local government reorganisation plan that we've submitted for consideration. I think it's about £44 million from memory that would have to be worked on, that would take it back into a balanced position over so many years. So you're right, there's going to be some difficult decisions made when the unitary is set up. The other one, temporary accommodation, there's a range of things. We have invested the £5 million, which will lead to savings. We're on negotiations with other things. I'm sure Sharon might have some other information, but there are partnerships that we're considering. I'll ask Sharon if she wants to add anything to that.
Actually, well, I think put it in the context that it's a national problem. It's not just our problem here. And I think alongside adult social care and SEND costs, it's the one cost that is kind of bringing councils to breakpoint in terms of financially up and down the country. I think we are, as Ashley has said, we have managed to bring costs down, but the demand keeps rising. So we got council approval for the general fund acquisition programme. We've acquired 20 properties which we're using for families for temporary accommodation. So that brings down the cost of using more kind of costly privately provided accommodation for those people. We're now turning our attention to single homelessness because we've currently got, as of yesterday, 55 single people in temporary accommodation. So we're now looking at how we can do something similar to acquire properties to accommodate single people as well. The problem being the move on accommodation into permanent accommodation. So we're kind of solving the temporary accommodation issue to some degree and lowering costs, but we haven't got enough properties to move people through into for permanent accommodation. So that's kind of the next thing that needs to be. It needs to be resolved. The private rented sector is closing up to us. The challenges that there are around the private rented sector, and affordable housing delivery is difficult. We do what we can to maximise affordable housing delivery, but it still isn't enough for the demand that we've got.
Any follow-up, Brian?
Yes and no. We have applications for houses for multiple occupation, which are usually refused. Well, surely we need those if there's these single people looking for accommodation.
I don't think we've refused applications for HMOs because a lot of them don't need planning permission. It depends on how many rooms they're being converted to. So at the moment, I'm not aware that we've actually refused any for HMOs. I can look into that. But they are certainly a solution, notwithstanding that they also present problems as well. Hence the report that's coming through to executive on Monday night around controls around HMOs.
Thank you, Sharon. Right. Any other questions at all? One from me then. In terms of the budget, clearly, as Brian so eloquently described, the Titanic approaching a cliff edge, we are going over the edge in 28-29. What happens if local government review is delayed? What's the plan?
Obviously, at the moment, we're concentrating on balancing the budget. We will have a general fund budget of about £2.6 million. So to get to zero, you've still got to get through £2.6 million. And obviously, we would consider that we would know of that, I think, earlier than the last minute. And so what would happen? We would have to consider potential savings, new income. Even on the back of this, we're probably going to contact MHCLG to speak about the position that we find ourselves in, because just to let them know that potentially there is a problem that would be handed on to a unitary, and it'd obviously cover our position as well. I'm also taking advice on something that's called capital flexibilities, where when you begin to invest for efficiencies, you can capitalise those costs and help to offset them so you're not incurring the cost. So that's where we would begin to go. So as soon as it became apparent that the date was postponed past the 1st of April 28, then yes, you would be in a position where you would have to decide how you would bring yourself back into balance. But at the moment, we do have 2 years where we're expected to be in power, where we will deliver a balanced budget, and we will, remember, have a general fund balance that will be over £2 million. But it is, we are using those reserves, and there has been a lot of consultation. Government have said that although they've given us a 3-year settlement, they will obviously consult on each year's individual settlement from now on. So I assume that would feed into that sort of scenario as well. But you're right, some action would have to be taken to address that indicative figure that I've given in this report for 28-29. But we'll wait and see if government delay. Yes, that's it.
So there isn't a plan yet, but if one is needed, you'll produce it. Have I understood that?
If a plan was needed, we would produce a plan. We would have to produce a plan because legally you have to balance your budget. So as soon as we got notification that it was going to be delayed, obviously, first off, we discussion with the SLT, then discussion with members as to what shape or form of plan would be needed to bring us back into balance for that year. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question from me. What is the date at which, given the current timetable for local government review, we are expecting HBBC to cease to exist as an entity and a financial body?
Current expectation is 31st of March 28 would be the when we finish.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other question? Yes. Kelly.
Sort of just a follow-up, really. Thanks for the explanation, Ashley. It's really good, really helpful. There is a bit of a lack of reality about this conversation, I find that, because given the economic problems of the country, we're being forced to spend actually more and more, aren't we, when it comes down to it? We're given more responsibilities, some of which are funded, but even those that are funded, they're still coming from the general taxpayer. And I think that's a real issue. I really do. I think keep burdening local government with more and more responsibilities, some of which are frankly of marginal benefit. It seems to me just crazy in the current circumstances. On the specifics, though, about if we, if our backs were to the wall and the whole process was delayed, local government reorganisation, and we were then forced to cut into some of our discretionary expenditure quite hard, how would that process work? Would there be an appropriate consultation with, councillors rather than just going through the executive, frankly? I mean, has this been discussed at all amongst officers about how you might approach that difficult issue? Are there particular priorities that have been set for potential cuts? I think this is something that it does worry people. I mean, I think anybody reading this excellent report would be worried, given the fact there's still an issue about when this legislation is going to come forward to Parliament and what it's going to contain. So I think we almost do need a sort of backup plan somehow. I appreciate now officer time is consumed with lots of other issues, but it does worry me about where this might be going, because I think given the current political instability nationally, we just don't know what's going to happen, do we?
Thank you, Dr. Martin. There was a statement. Oh, Julie, do you want to come back? Yeah.
Sorry, yes, just to reassure members that obviously, as Ashley's alluded to in terms of planning, we are mindful that if there were things that we would need to look at, we have already been working on that, because Ashley often gives us the kind of the death knell, if you like, that the worst case scenario. So we would be able to work those options up. But I think in the first instance, it would be very much contacting MHCLG to advise them of the precarious position that we are in. And I think it's worth noting that they are very adamant at the moment that the timescales will not slip, that they are progressing at pace, and they want to make sure all of those deadlines are hit. So very much they are keen to press ahead, but obviously we will wait and see. And the consultation, I think there's a further consultation has been launched today. So they are, doesn't look like they're going to slow down the pace anytime soon.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks. Okay, Miriam.
Actually, throughout the document, you talk about identify new income and cost savings, but we don't actually put any bones on that.
I think it's a reference. Some of these reports have to sort of point out let's say, the obvious. If we can't balance our budget, we've got to find savings and income. So that I always put a note in there to say, well, if things go a bit wrong, you were going to have to do that. Based on what we have here, that's why I've included the 28-29. That's where I could see if we were continuing would be a position. But on current guidance and what we know, that won't be Hinckley's issue. Obviously, we will try and do our best to hand over as healthy a position as we can do to the unitary, but we have to deliver the service that we're mandated to do and that many of our residents rely on for as long as we possibly can. And that's the plan here, is to try to do that as far as we can. If something comes out of the woodwork in these 2 years, then obviously you'll hear about it and we'll have to do something. But on these expectations, we shouldn't be forced into a position where we're having to make savings for the 2 years that will be the medium-term financial strategy. Thanks.
Paul, did you have a question?
Yes, I mean, obviously it doesn't make for comfortable reading when we've got this year that's the end of the MTFS, or just off the edge of it. But presumably this time next year, we would have to either know that the proposals for local reorganisation are going ahead, or we would have to be taking more proactive decisions in case that it was either faltering or some other strategy would have to be done. So it would give us a minimum of a year to work out what we could do. Is that a fair assumption of my reading?
Well, a year's a long time for us to know what would be happening. There's a lot of things that could happen. We will know which plan is going forward. We'll also begin to know a little bit of the outline of hopefully how the shadow authority will work, and we'll also potentially know if there are any restrictions on what we can or can't do in level of our reserves. At the moment, I'm not aware that there's a minimum level of, for example, earmark reserves that we might have to hold. So there's a lot of questions that I would like the answer to, but I won't know for a year. But you're right. If all of a sudden this time next year they're saying we're going to delay a year, then yes, we would have to find a way of balancing that final year out. I have, as Julie's alluded to, I have in the past spoken to SLT about the need to have at least something that we can begin to look at. And there are some areas that are already on a spreadsheet that we could begin to pull out, but they still need work before I or SLT would say, oh, that's the plan of what we're going to do. It's very much just thinking and jotting things down. But that's where we would kick off what are our statutory services, what are our non-statutory services, how do members feel about those, what can we do? So there would be a lot of activity to try and balance the 28-29 if it was still Hinckley and Bosworth that they had to do that. But all the indications are at the moment that that's not going to happen. But if it does, then yes, there'll be a lot of rushing around in a short period of time to make sure that we can balance that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Any other questions at all? No. Okay. Well, we said we'd take these items one at a time. So that was the first one, the medium-term financial strategy. Are we happy to note that report and for the recommendation or for the questions that we've asked to be fed back to full council as part of the budget report? Is everyone happy with that? Yes. Okay, that's agreed then. Thank you. If we can then move on to 8B, the general fund budget, which starts on page, I think it's 69 of your pack. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the general fund budget, there's a lot of similarities because it's the first year of the medium-term financial strategy. So some of the information that's in the report you've seen, such as the detail on the financial settlement, which is just on page 66, just above paragraph 3.3. So I'll take you down to the budget summary. There's a table just under paragraph 3.9. where you can see the original 25 estimate, the revised estimate, which is the forecast for the year end, and then you've got the budget for 26-27, which is the same budget that was in the medium-term financial strategy. And what you can see is that for 25-26, the net service expenditure is about £1.2 million higher than the budget. Part of that is carry forwards, but there is the net additional temporary accommodation costs in the year, £700,000. It's net because obviously for some of that we get paid benefit income. So if you remember, members agreed, I think it was about £900,000 increase in the spend budget in year, but when we did that, it pulls in some of that income, so you end up with a net 700,000. We got some additional planning income, which helped, additional trade waste income that helped, but the award for salaries was slightly higher than we had budgeted, which pulled in an extra 200,000. Legal, there was a lot of legal advice being taken last year, and agency costs were increased about 265,000 on that, and so that gives you the 1.2 million overall. 26-27, you can see there's an increase of 2.4 million. I think we've got that, if you remember the table that we looked at in the previous report, gives you most of the details of how we've got to that position. Obviously, there's the food waste, etc., that we mentioned before. Again, there's a table on major variations on page 69, and you can see that over there, Overall expenditure pressures, 8.1 million. On the other side of that, income and savings, 5.3 million. As I've pointed out before, some of those are more technical in nature in their adjustments. And then you've got the service and contractual changes, which we've got there, which we spoke about. That's the food waste, pay pressure, and the because the pool has gone, we won't be getting any income from that source. There wasn't anything else particularly in this that I was going to call to attention. It does have table 4, which covers the special expenditure, special expenses area as well, which you can see how that works. But there wasn't anything in particular that I think is in here that we probably haven't covered in the medium term financial strategy. So I'm happy to take any questions on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions from members for Ashley in relation to the general fund budget? A naive one from me then, in the absence of anyone else. Where is the council tax increase figure within here? Not in the general fund budget?
The council tax, it is noted in the, obviously it's £5 for that we're increasing on the council tax. That is one of the things that's listed in the medium-term financial strategy. If you go back in the long documents, there's a list of some of the decisions that members have made, and it was also in the budget strategy that came to scrutiny at an earlier meeting as well.
I was just looking for it within the general fund budget, thinking that would be an element within that particular paper.
Yes.
I see
Ilias mentioned, I think it's
Ilias has got his hand up. If you
3.12,
Yeah,
spotted.
yeah, it's in 3.12 and in section 210 as well.
Thank you, missed it. Any other questions at all? Paul?
Yeah, just on the new food waste costs, I think I've just read that those costs were not fully funded by government, but I'm not sure we've got an actual figure. Do we know what we might claim would be the figure of the cost that we've had to fund for those?
It's the way the settlement has worked, other than the amount for temporary accommodation, rough sleeping and domestic abuse that's rolled up into a £573,000 figure. Everything else seems to be rolled up into the RSG or the transitional relief. There's been a lot of conversation about, well, can't you just identify and tell us which bit of that? But they haven't been pulled on that in terms of the detail. So when I say it's not fully funded from the government point of view, they would say, yes, it is, it's in the RSG. But when I say, yes, but I've got payroll and I've got food waste and I've got temporary, so which bit relates to which, that's when it begins to break down. So they can say, we have increased your funding, but when you actually get to, when you want to point your finger at the figure, it's very difficult to point out. Our overall funding, they would argue, has gone up by £2 million, but my argument is the pressures that we faced, some of those because of government strategy and decision making and policy, is higher than the increase in the overall funding. Because, I mean, for example, temporary accommodation is 1.5 million. Well, the temporary accommodation, rough sleeping and domestic abuse doesn't touch that. And they'll say, well, yeah, but there's a bit in the RSG. Well, that doesn't really help us to fund the pressure that we've got. And so that's what concerns me about the settlements. You can, from the government side, I can see why they would say they've increased the funding, but from our side, we would still say it's not enough to cover our actual costs.
Thank you. Any other supplementary report?
No, I was just going to say it obviously is a material increase that we're having to suffer at no sort of option in terms of the council, and not to be knowing how much we're having to, you know, what really the impact of that is something that is quite disconcerting. But I understand the answer completely.
Brian?
Well, the food waste one always winds me up big time. why there's so much in the first place and so many regulations on how it's disposed of. And the general consensus is food waste will go to AD plants. But now people are complaining of the residue of AD plants shouldn't be spread on farmland. So don't people ever join up thinking, because the cost of spreading it, if it doesn't go on farmland, well, don't know what the alternative is. So they're creating their own problems by putting regulations out. I mean, the best way is to reduce food waste in the first place, which is education in a lot of cases. But if they want to go to an AD plant, the AD plant has got to dispose of its waste. And if they make even more regulations to dispose of its waste, you're in a no-win situation.
A question or a statement there, Brian? I think both. Anybody wish to comment on the on that?
I've learned a lot about AD plans. I think that is something that, you know, maybe people should feed back to council, and obviously education of people on food waste and separating your food waste, I suppose, is part of that. If people see the amount of food waste that they're disposing of, hopefully it will begin to focus their mind on that. So that's the only observation I can make rather than that.
Okay, thank you. Miriam.
Staying on food waste, somewhere in the narrative, you actually said that going to food waste may actually decrease the amount going into the black bin, and you were therefore reviewing perhaps 3 weekly collections of the black bin that would bring about a cost saving, and also putting in smaller black bins. Have we got any idea what that might mean to the council?
Yes, there has been a consideration of whether, if a saving was needed, we would come to members and talk about that. I think it's a bit too early on the food waste to know whether or not it will. There's an assumption that it will. I know that leaving it longer to empty the normal waste has been something that's not has been as popular with members as a decision. But I think if our backs got pushed to the wall on some of the savings that we would need, it would obviously be something that we would need to bring back to you and consider. So it's sort of laid out in the narrative as it's a potential, but we're not at the stage now where we were thinking of coming to you with that. But it would be an area where we would consider if savings were needed.
Julie.
Yeah, just to confirm as well, I think one of the reports that had been picked up earlier, so the waste bin and collection policy was agreed at executive last week, and there's no current proposals to change anything about residual waste collection timing or size of bins at the moment, but it is hoped that with education and with changes in behaviour that we may be able to make some changes to particularly the bin sizes in the future, but certainly no changes at present.
Thank you, Julie, for that. Any other questions at all? No. Oh, Dr. Moore.
It's sort of a follow-up. It's something that just frustrates me a bit, that we can't seem to quite unpack just how much these extra commitments that are being imposed upon us actually will cost the council. Is there any way of de-aggregating that information? I mean, you make the point about the rate support grant, there's more money coming in, and the government's not being very transparent about what they're giving us and what's particular tasks. But can we come up with a figure to tell the public that, you know, the government's imposed this amount of extra responsibilities on us? Can we do that from the figures that you've presented? Because I can't quite see how they might be de-aggregated. I mean, it's obviously, for instance, 1.4 million for the food waste. That's clearly an extra cost that's been imposed. But what about other things that have been imposed by government in the last 12 months that we need to be aware of? Can we come up with an actual figure so we can explain to the public why we're in this situation?
What we can do is we know the costs of the services that we deliver, and in some instances like the temporary accommodation, etc., we know the amount of funding that government have given us that's been ring-fenced for that. So we know that there's a big difference between the two. So we can come at it from that perspective. So that's how we could begin to tackle it, to try and get the information. First, we just look at the cost of services and then try to look at how much funding has been given. I think the trouble that we do have is some of the funding that's been given is RSGs and non-ring fence grants. it's just a big lump of money. And that's where you begin to run into a bit of difficulties unpicking what exactly is in that RSG. And in meetings that I've had where the representatives from MHCLG are, they strangely argue, they say, well, it's in your benefit if it's not ring fenced, because you can use it to the best and most efficient way as you see fit. And we say, yeah, but we'd like to know how much you think you're giving us, and they haven't been pulled on that point at the moment. So.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. If there are no more questions, are we happy to note this report with the questions, that comments that we've made, to be referred on to full council? Yes, all happy? Yes, thank you. Okay, if we go on then to item C, the housing revenue account.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, housing revenue accounts. I'll just pull out some of the highlights. Obviously, rent setting. We've gone for CPI plus 1%, but that's as of September, which gives us a rent increase of 4.8%. That's what's allowed under the government guidance. It also underpins our HRA strategy and our investment strategy to do that. Obviously, it will be used to meet things like decent home standards and all the regulations that we have. I'll just then move on to the revised 25-26, so you can see what's happened in the year. That's at paragraph 3.8. You can see that we've had some expenditure there, increased spend of £178,000 in the 25-26 year. There's a table there that runs down that, gives you that variation. We did get some additional income on rent above that was expected, so that has helped to reduce that impact. After that, the result on the HRA balances at the 31st of March, 1.1 million against the original estimate of 849,000. In 25-26, the contribution to the regeneration reserve will ensure the HRA balances equate to £250 per property. The reason I'm drawing that is what we've set as the council is what we will do. So we've managed to achieve that for that particular purpose. If you look down the revenue accounts, I'll just touch on paragraph 3.16. The estimated deficit for the HRA in 26-27, £289,000 the year. We'll get a year-end balance of 892,000 after allowing for the rent changes. And the table there just runs through the major changes that's causing that in the HRA. As you know, there, one of those things is depreciation of 221,000. But members remember that depreciation can be used to be put into a reserve and is used for investments. So although the HRA has got that deficit figure, it's not really influencing on the performance or the things that the HRA needs to invest in. Housing repairs budget, just under paragraph 3.18. You can say that changes in legislation has led to growth of 357,000. There's a list of the key elements there. We've got additional vehicles, a fixed term contract, 97,000, stock condition survey, one of the key ones, EPC, which is the standard certification that we need to have properties, and additional site maintenance costs, which has led to that 357,400 for the repairs. Working balances, which are just there at the paragraph 320-21. You can see that the estimates and where we forecast them to be. There's nothing in those tables that give any concerns. They're where we're expecting them to be. And then if you look at the reserves position, again, the reserves of the HRA, that's just at the top of page 86 of the pack. The reserves are there. Health reserves on the HRA, which will do which we use for regeneration and major repairs, with an actual increase for 26-27. So overall, the HRA is in a healthy position. So most of our concerns are obviously on the general fund, but the HRA stands out as working well and has the reserves and balances that it needs. Those are I think, are the highlights of that report. I'm happy to try and deal with any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. A much more positive picture painted than the general fund. So any questions at all from members regarding the housing revenue account? Yes.
Just a point for clarification. Under page 87, you talk about regeneration reserves. Is that regeneration as in improvement to current existing housing, or is that additional housing?
It's a range. Basically, it's to implement the housing investment plan. So it just underlies the general investment. There are some obviously new properties coming through on the overall investment, but it just feeds into the general investment in HRA, which would be our existing stock as well.
Any other questions at all? Okay. Couple from me. The 54,000 additional income from new properties. That's what, 10 new properties?
I haven't got that figure to hand. I don't know if Ilias has got that information to hand. I don't want to drop him in it, but I suppose he hasn't got that. But if he has, then now's the time to speak up.
His light has not gone on, so I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, that's so. I was looking for something else. One of the question was, sorry, which section were we picking that up from?
There's £54,000 additional income that's in the column in the box at the start of the report relating to additional properties. I was just asking how many properties that related to.
I think that was about 12 or 13 properties as that when this report was done.
Thank you, Elias. Yeah, that makes sense. We have a strategy. Oh, sorry, Brian.
There's 14 extra ones last night.
Yeah, I'm just trying to join the dots. Okay. The strategy within the general fund is use of balances prior to local government review. That's not the strategy that's been taken with the HRA. What's the reason for the difference?
HRA strategy obviously goes back to a 30-year plan. My understanding is that there was a modelling for the unitary of how the HRA would work, but the fundamentals of our strategy are there, and it's a long-term plan. HRA strategy is a very long-term plan, and it's just that would reflect where we would see it be going. Obviously, the unitary might have a different view. I don't know if Sharon agrees with it, or if there's anything else that you'd like to add to that. I think that's where we're at with it. It's just that it's a long-term plan. Thanks.
Ilias's hand has gone up, so
Yeah, I
Ilias,
guess.
do you want to come in?
Yeah, the other thing to remember is the HRA is a ring-fenced budget, while the general fund isn't. So unitary would have a bit more leeway on how it spends, how it deals with the general fund. With the HRA, you've got to keep it ring-fenced. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments at all? No. Any other questions? No. Okay. Can we agree therefore to note the report and for the comments to be passed to full council? Yes. Thank you all. Okay. Item 8D, fees and charges. Ashley, back to yourself.
Okay. Well, obviously, it's basically what it says on the tin. It's a list of fees and charges, and the main thing is it does bring in about £8.8 million of income to the council. The only thing that the report tends to bring out, there's a list on page 97 of those items that have had the most significant increase on the fees and charges. Some of those will be related to regulatory requirements or the changes that have been agreed across the piece. And so the only things to think about in this is our fees and charges are a key part of how we hope to balance those budget pressures that we've had. And then there's a list of the larger charges that have come through, and then the bulk of the document obviously is a list of the various fees and charges that are across the council. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ashley, for that. Any questions from members regarding the fees and charges? Yes.
Just one question, stray dogs, microchipping, home visit. How do you do a home visit on a stray dog?
You want me to? I think it's just coming under that heading. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to. That's about where we offer that service and go out to do.
Apologies, it was
So,
just,
yeah. So
it was sitting
it's
there
just
looking at me.
unfortunate how it's come under that heading. I think the heading obviously perhaps requires attention.
Yes, John.
It's a small point, but my only concern is, another increase for the hire of Hollycroft Park bandstand. I presume that reflects increasing costs. I mean, my concern would be that, of course, a lot of local voluntary groups, including schools, have used that in the past for concerts, and it's been very popular. And so I wouldn't want to see it increase too much more if it started putting off, voluntary groups in the local area being able to use it. Do we have any feedback from local community groups who have used it, and do we always charge them that full fee, or is there a discretion to reduce it for community organisations?
I'd have to get back on whether there's discretionary use, but usually the fees are tried to be set to cover the costs of providing the service, but we can note the issues that have been raised. But I would have to get back to you if there is ever a discount or a waiver of those fees. I'm not aware that there are, but I'll get back to you on that one.
Thank you. Any other questions at all? If not, are we happy to note the report and pass the comments forward to full council? Yes. Thank you all. Okay. Next report then is item 8E, capital programme. Ashley.
Thank you. The capital programme, again, this has been, it's good practice for the length of that is in here. The reason it goes to 28-29 is SIPFA lays out a good practice model, and so we've put it in the format of the good practice model. So that's why it includes 28-29, and obviously some of the decisions do have that are already made have ongoing consequences. If you look at the page 131, you have the overall capital expenditure on the various schemes. You can see that the general fund has £24 million worth of capital expenditure over the period in question. The HRA obviously has a much higher level, £58 million. That covers all of the investments in our existing stock, any capital purchases that are there. You've got a breakdown for both of how it will be funded. You've got capital receipts. On the general fund, you have borrowing. Again, you can see that borrowing is increasing, that will be needed to fund the capital programme. The same on the HRA. But you can see there we were funding it through major reserves and the regeneration reserve, which covers all of the investments in the HRA. If you go on to, there's another, if you look at paragraph 326, members may be interested. We don't actually have investment properties as such, but we do have parts of the estate that do bring in income that fall under our capital. So you've got the leisure centre management fee over £1 million, Hinkley Hub over £100,000, commercial estates income, obviously all those industrial units, etc. Best part of £1 million, car parking 618, block C 345. That's the gross income. So you can see that there is a fair amount of income also generated by capital investments. If you look on page 138, that just gives you a breakdown of schemes that have been rephased. Most of them are relatively small rephasing. The acquisitions and development scheme has been rephased, is the largest one. That's the purchase of the general fund properties have come out of that, but it does leave a balance of just over 5 million that hasn't been used, that has been rephased. There are no projects against that at the moment, that 5 million. There is 10 million that is held, and that's to try and identify schemes that could potentially make savings, generate income for us. They wouldn't be in pure investments. They would have to have an improvement or an investment in the area, or a business need, like the general fund properties we can do because it delivers housing, so it's not just an investment. So that's been rephased, but there aren't projects against that. And the Jubilee, that is just a small piece of rephasing as that gets finished off. If you then you can look into the appendices, which just give you a little bit more detail of the various schemes that are there. The one thing I would in Appendix 1, you can see that now the crematorium has fallen out of the capital programme because we're looking to dispose of that site. I wasn't going to go over the detail of the appendices. Obviously, it's a list of all the individual areas that we're investing in, but happy to try and take any questions if you have. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions at all? Okay. I mean, there are some significant changes, and I think it's important to note those as we do consider this report. But again, it is a major capital programme, and something which is inevitably going to have flex as decisions are made to adjust our approach to different projects in the light of commercial and other experiences. So very comprehensive, and thank you for that. Okay, so if we're happy to note the report, okay, thank you all. That takes us on to the last of the reports in the series on the budget, the Treasury Management Strategy, item 8F. Ashley.
I'm sure this is the one that everybody looks forward to.
Save the best till last.
That's right, the best till then. Obviously, it's an important report because it sets out the limits of borrowing that we can do. It sets out the credit finance requirement. The credit finance requirements is how much potentially we would need to borrow to fund all of the commitments that we have in the capital programme. There's a table on page 155, and what you can see is overall our capital finance requirements is increasing, and it's increasing significantly. We go from 113 or just short of 114 million in 24-25, and by the time we get to 27-28, there's 139 million pounds of capital financing. Now that can only come from external debt, or we under borrow. Now the potential indicators are basically where we think we're going to borrow, where we can borrow to, and that's either internally or externally, and when we have to come back to members, because it puts a limit on what officers can do without coming back to members. But basically, when you approve the capital programme, you're approving the financing of that capital, and the capital financing requirement falls out of those approvals. So once it's approved, we need to finance it, and that can come from external debt, or where possible, we try to underborrow and use internal resources. That is actually, as we coming into these final few years, is becoming more difficult to use underborrowing, because our reserves are going down, and also the pressures on our cash flow are increasing. We've got an extra £2 million worth of cash flow pressures, so your ability to remain underborrowed actually it isn't as easy. But you look at the table that's on under paragraph 314, it's sort of, when you look at it first, you see, oh, we're under borrowed, and the under borrowing looks about the same, but it's not really, because the capital financing requirement is increasing each year, and so you're actually pulling in more external borrowing. And so what you can see is there are additional borrowing requirements, and the under borrowing is on a higher level of capital financing requirements. So the actual total of external debt, and that's the bit that pulls the interest in, is increasing. So the underborrowing, although it looks as though it's staying the same, it's staying the same on a bigger requirement, and new debt is still coming in. So you need to just take care and realise that you're still pulling in new debt, even though it looks as though you're under borrowing. It's staying the same. And the tables seem to reiterate that, but they're giving you more information. So you've got the external debt at the top of paragraph, sorry, at the top of page 159, you can actually see the amount of external debt that's there and how much it will be increasing over time. So you start off at about 82 million. By the time you get to 27-28, on this expectation, you've got 109 million pounds of external debt, and that's going to pull in a lot more interest at a higher rate than historically we've had to have. And so you've got that pressure on the, the picture of the reserves going down, the income not being quite enough. You've got this external interest beginning to be paid. That's being pulled in. So that's sort of the key messages to take from that. I know this report sometimes seems harder to pull out those key messages, but that's the key one to take away. Our external debt's going up, our interest will be going up, and we're committing to that through the capital programme that we're agreeing. So we have to finance it in this way. So that's the important messages that this is giving you, and the rest is there's a lot of technical stuff in around prudential indicators, but that's the message that I would concentrate on. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Not an easy one to explain, but you did a good job there. Even I got it. Any questions at all from members? Paul?
Yeah, as we get closer to the reserves coming down, in the context of borrowing, will month by month sensitivity to the cash flows coming in and out become more of a concern to the way that we manage our borrowings?
Treasury management is a key part of what we do to try and to reduce the interest bill that we have. But because we've historically been under borrowed, and we are under borrowed, we've still got some leeway in terms of borrowing cash to make sure our cash flow is serviced with these prudential indicators. So it is managed basically, on a monthly basis, and then we decide how long can we leave the debt, and we leave it as late as possible before we take the external debt to try and save the cash. And sometimes we make the decision, do we make a short-term one and then refresh that loan to take advantage of short-term interest rates were a bit lower than longer, or longer to try and space out when they're going to fall. So yes, it's a key part of what we do, and as over these 2 years and as this pressure builds, there'll be more focus in the actual reports that we do, the outturn reports. There is a cash flow position reported in that. So if members are interested in that, we tend to report new debt that's coming on, and we give a graphical display of how the cash flow position is in the year. But you can see when we think we're going to take on new debt in that report. Thanks.
Have we got a particular time in the year that is our traditional struggle period to?
Usually it's near the oh yeah, I'll let Ilyas answer this because he's quite into the cash flow.
Ilyas?
Yeah. So thanks, Chair. So I guess there's two parts to it. As our reserves get used up, you rightly pointed out, our cash flow position gets worse. So hence we have to do the borrowing. We can't stay at the under borrowed position, so we have to do the long-term borrowing just to make sure we can fund our capital expenditure rather than funding it for our cash balances. As far as certain pinch points of the year, generally speaking, our pinch points used to come towards the back end of March, where we've got quite a lot of significant payments. We make it like a lot of district councils the same, but we're not getting, because our direct debits for our business rates and council tax are normally on a 10-month basis. We don't get that income coming in March, but we've got the expenditure going out. So March tends to be a pinch point. And normally we know it's a short-term pinch point because we've got like a cash flow that for a couple of years we sort of forward forecast. So sometimes we'll go in the market and just borrow short term for a week just to get over that pinch point rather than doing any long term borrowing. But towards the end of March, normally we have a pinch point because we don't get the direct debits coming from council tax, but we've got large amounts of expenditure going out. So that, and most district councils seem to have that same pinch point throughout towards the back end of March. Most of the other parts of the year we can manage it.
Thanks, Ilias. Thanks for that. Any other, James?
I was just going to ask a question about interest rates and borrowing. I mean, presumably these figures are based on current interest rates, assuming current interest will stay the same, or do we make assumptions that, you know, with perhaps inflation coming down, interest rates will come down, and we'll have access to better credit facilities, or is that not something you calculate into these forward-looking figures?
For this particular report, this is just reporting the capital that we would need to loan. Prudential interest rates at the moment, the longer you want to borrow, the higher the rate, which is indicating obviously some nervousness about longer term borrowing, so short term borrowing. But we do tend to make a judgment about how much interest we think we might be paying in any one year. So when we're putting the budget together and the MTFS together, I will try and think, well, is it going to be current, or can we lower it a bit for the next year and the year after? So yes, we do try and use some judgment to bring it down, but we tend to err on the prudent side rather than cutting it. I don't think we're going to see it going back down to 2% or less than 2% in the next 2 years. So we tend to hover around that 4 or 5% or 5 to 4% sort of forecast when we're looking forward.
Pinched my question. Any other questions at all from anybody in relation to the capital programme report? No? Okay. Well, with that, are we happy to note the report and pass the comments on to full council? Yes? Agreed? Thank you all. Well, thank you for that marathon, Ashley. Appreciate it. It's you're here for us to test you to some extent, and yeah, you stood up to the test very well, so thank you for that. Okay, that takes us on to item 9, the pay policy statement. Sharon, I think you're presenting this one, yeah?
Yep, thanks, Chair. So this is the annual pay policy statement, which is reported each year and must be published by the 1st of April of each year. A couple of key points to note in the statement, as you'll see highlighted in 3.4C, the pay gap between the top and median average earner has remained the same compared to last year. And this was partly because of the National Pay Award given to staff this year was identical across all those pay groups at 3.2%. And the gender pay gap as at the 31st of March 2025 was 4.4%, which was the same as the previous year, and pleasing to see significantly lower than the national average of 11.2%. When we compare ourselves locally, we remain kind of mid-range in terms of that gender pay gap. That was all I was going to pull out of the report. You have it each year, so happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sharon. A comprehensive and largely self-explanatory report, which takes us through all of the details of this required reporting mechanism. Do we have any questions at all regarding it? No? So, are you happy to propose the second? Yeah, David to propose, Joyce to second. All those in favour? Thank you all. I think you see it again at full council as well, don't you, in this one? So, yeah. Thank you. Well, that draws us to a conclusion. Thank you all for your attendance. I can't feel my feet. I don't know about everybody else, but certainly it's kept us all very awake and attentive. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Good night.